One bucket, a little water, 5 minutes to get it going, then you walk away. 2 days later, the surface already looks fuller than it did before. No soil to haul in, no bed to build, no weeds to keep up with, no waiting half a season just to find out whether the thing even likes your yard. Just a shallow container, a quiet green layer, and a plant that keeps multiplying while you are off doing something else. And once you realize that this tiny floating plant can also be surprisingly rich in protein, the whole thing starts to feel like one of those ideas that should be much more widely known than it is. Because when most of us picture protein, we picture a whole chain behind it. Chickens, soy, feed, freezers, fields, expensive tubs lined up on a pantry shelf. We picture land, equipment, time, a system with a lot of moving parts. We do not picture a calm, green layer floating on still water. And that blind spot is a big part of the story. The plant usually gets lumped under duckweed or water lentils. And when people start talking about the tiny edible kind that shows up in food conversations, they are often talking about wolfia. If you have never looked at it closely, it does not exactly announce itself as important. It looks like tiny green grains, almost like somebody sprinkled green couscous across the water and forgot about it. Easy to ignore, easy to dismiss, easy to mistake for something you should skim off and throw away. Then you watch it spread. Then you look again. Then it stops looking like background and starts looking like a system. The University of Colorado Boulder's AS magazine, covering space health research, I described duckweed as one of the fastest-growing plants on Earth and called it the most protein-dense plant on the planet. Even if you do not lead with that line, it changes the way you see the plant once you already have the picture in your head. It is not just a green surface anymore. It is a very small plant doing a very unusual amount of work. What made this even more interesting to me was realizing it was never just some strange lab idea. In parts of Thailand, people were already eating water lentils long before most Western audiences had any reason to care. Wageningen University and Research points out that wolfia had already been eaten in Thailand before Europe went through the formal approval process, and WUR's own work helped lead to duckweed being approved in Europe as a fresh vegetable. That changes the feeling of the whole topic. It moves it out of the internet superfood category and into something older, steadier, more grounded than that. And honestly, that made more sense to me than the hype version. Because if a thing is genuinely useful, a lot of times it does not arrive in history with a spotlight on it. It just gets used. Quietly. In kitchens. In places where people do not need a trend report to tell them what belongs in a pan. Then, much later, modern institutions come in and measure what people were already living with. That part matters too, because it is one thing to say, people have eaten this. It is another thing to see named institutions take it seriously enough to test, study, and regulate it. Wageningen spent about 10 years on research that helped get duckweed approved as a fresh vegetable in Europe. Their food work did not stop at safety language either. They actually put water lentils into real dishes. Soup, stew, ravioli, pesto. People tried them and responded positively. WR describes the flavor as plant-like and slightly nutty, with a nice bite despite how tiny the plant is. That is useful because it gives a normal person somewhere to stand. You do not have to imagine some heroic future where you are living off buckets and declaring protein independence. You just need to imagine the first sensible use. The first thing you would actually try in a normal American kitchen without making the whole meal feel weird. For me, that is eggs. Not a smoothie first. Not a wellness bowl. Not trying to act like a spoonful of wet floating greens is somehow a complete lunch. Eggs make sense. You rinse the clean cultivated duckweed or water lentils, let them drain, soften a little scallion or onion in butter or olive oil, add the greens for a moment, and then fold them into a soft scramble or an omelet the same way you would use spinach, chives, or another tender green. Salt, pepper, maybe cheddar, maybe Monterey Jack, maybe hot sauce if that is your thing. Now it stops feeling like a concept and starts feeling like breakfast. And I think that matters more than people admit. Because a useful food that never enters daily life is still just an idea. Wageningen's taste work actually helps here. Their panels did not just tolerate water lentils, they like them in real dishes. And in at least one soup comparison, they like the water lentil version more than the spinach one. So treating it like a savory green with a slightly nutty edge is not some desperate workaround. It is probably the most natural first bridge into a U.S. kitchen. Now, there is one distinction I do not want to blur because this is where people get sloppy. Easy to grow is not the same as automatically safe to eat. That sounds obvious when you say it out loud, but you would not know it from the way some people talk about this plant online. Known edible water lentils, grown in clean water, under controlled conditions, with food-safe handling. That is one category. Something scooped out of a roadside ditch, livestock runoff, or some stagnant pond with who knows what in it. That is another category entirely. Wageningen's approval work makes that plain. Food use depends on controlled, hygienic cultivation. And WUR's project notes say some water lentil species were considered safe for human consumption in Europe, when cultivated in a hygienic way. That wording matters. Same family of plants, very different context. To me, that does not make the idea less exciting, it makes it more useful. Because the real value here is not just, look at this weird, fast-growing plant. It is learning how to think about a plant properly. Human food safe, farm safe, feed use only. Leave it alone. Those categories are going to matter more and more if people want low-input food systems that are actually worth trusting. And this plant really does seem built for people who do not have a lot of space or a lot of patience for high-maintenance setups. That is another reason NASA keeps coming back into the conversation. Not because slapping NASA on something makes it automatically important, but because space growing strips the question down to something very practical. What gives you useful nutrition fast, in very little space, with very little waste? NASA Armstrong's write-up on Spacelab's work zeroed in on duckweed because it is rapidly growing, protein-rich, and does not need soil. Once you look at it from that angle, the whole thing feels less quirky and more obvious. What I like about that is that it does not really change the plant. It changes the question. If the question is, does this look like the kind of crop I see in a hardware store gardening ad? Then no, it does not. If the question is, can something small and low maintenance keep producing edible green material fast enough to be genuinely useful? Then, suddenly, you are in a different conversation. And that is where the setup starts to feel almost suspiciously simple. A shallow tote works well. A 5-gallon bucket can work. Even a wide tray can teach you the rhythm. You do not need depth the way you would with a lot of other things because the plant lives right on the surface. Rainwater is good. Dechlorinated tap water can work. Water from an established fish tank can be especially nice because it already brings nutrients with it. Then you spread your starter culture across the top, give it bright light, and mostly stay out of the way. That stay out of the way part may be the hardest thing for people. Because we are so used to thinking that more involvement means better growing. But some systems really do reward a lighter touch. You check it. It looks sparse. You come back later, and it has started closing in. You skim some off when the coverage gets dense, leave enough behind to keep going, and the whole thing starts teaching you a rhythm that feels less like harvest season and more like maintenance of a living surface. I think that is what makes this stick in people's head once they really see it. Not the single harvest, the repeat. The fact that the plant keeps replacing itself across the top. The fact that your work is closer to guiding a cycle than forcing a result. And that is where the market piece gets interesting too, in a quiet way, not because I want to sell anybody a product. More, just because it is one of those little signs that the ingredient is already slipping closer to everyday life than most people realize. There is already a packaged consumer product built around this family of plants called mankai. And on the ingredients side, companies like Parabel have been selling water lentil protein under the name Lentane, with applications in things like bars, snacks, and beverages. So even if most shoppers would never recognize the plant on sight, this is not locked away in some research paper anymore. It has already started edging into the market. That is the kind of detail I like because it does not need to be pushed too hard. It just makes you stop for a second, like, wait, people are already using this and most of us still have no idea what it is. That feeling is worth keeping. Not because packaged food is the point. It is not. The point is simply that the plant has crossed enough thresholds now that you cannot dismiss it as folklore, and you cannot dismiss it as pure science lab novelty either. Thailand gives it a real food history. Wageningen gives it serious food science and regulatory weight. NASA gives it a very practical efficiency argument. And the market piece tells you it has already started leaving the interesting idea stage. That is a pretty unusual trail for a plant most people still confuse with pond scum. I think that is also why the low-maintenance angle matters so much in the opening, because the promise is not just this plant is impressive. It is that this plant is impressive in a way ordinary people can actually try. That is a huge difference. A lot of good ideas stay abstract because the entry cost is too high. Too much gear, too much time, too much space, too much special knowledge before you even get your first result. This is one of those cases where the first experiment is small enough to be real. A bucket or a tote, a little water, 5 minutes to set it up. Then you go do something else. That is not nothing. That is exactly the sort of threshold that makes a strange idea turn into a household skill. And I think that is the bigger reason this subject stays with people once it clicks. It is not only about duckweed. It is about what counts as useful knowledge now. Food prices go up. Yards get smaller. More people live in spaces where a full garden is not realistic. Supply chains get shakier than they used to feel. In that kind of world, the household knowledge that matters may not always look grand. Sometimes it is just knowing that a tiny floating plant can turn a shallow container into a repeat harvest of edible greens, provided you do it cleanly and you know what kind you are actually growing. That is a humble kind of knowledge, but humble is not the same as weak. Some of the strongest systems are the ones that do not ask for much before they start giving something back. So I would not frame this as some miracle, and I would not frame it as a total answer either. A bucket of duckweed is not a whole food system, but it is not trivial. It is a very small, very low maintenance, very easy to overlook example of how much possibility can sit right outside the categories we are used to. And once you see that for yourself, it is hard not to start looking at other small things a little differently too.